First, we started in D.C. with the tragic and completely, it seems, avoidable disaster. As a mom, I can't say that without, everyone who's saying this was a mistake, someone made a mistake, this was a mistake. If that was your child on here, we now, there's speculation that there was children from a U.S. Ice skating team. I can't. It's haunting. That's not an oops. That's somebody's family. So let's try and get through it, because we all feel this human connection, this idea that somebody could be harmed by that civilians are harmed by our own military. So let's talk about what's the news.
Yeah, so there's some serious questions here, already raising some serious questions about air traffic control, government oversight, military training. Right in the airspace of one of the busiest airports in America, the New York Times is reporting this. And
right now they're saying a preliminary FAA safety report is revealing that the staffing for the air traffic control tower was, quote, not normal at the time of the plane crash. What does that mean? That's not something we want to hear. They're using this very ambiguous language increasingly, is that the pilots of the Black Hawk were fairly experienced, not normal. These are words that are cushioning we don't know what truth. So we're going to look for that. They also say that understaffing reportedly led to only one air traffic controller managing both planes and helicopters, when that is usually the job of two people. Why did that happen?
So President Trump must have known this, because he already indicated that he thinks the FAA is at fault here. We're going to look at that part of the story in a minute. But late last night, just to sort of set the stage of what actually happened here, an American Airlines flight 5342 collided midair with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter that was doing a training mission. This was apparently a routine training mission, according to the Department of Defense. While approaching Reagan National Airport there, you can see it in a fireball crashing into the Potomac in about 7 feet of water. Let that sink in for a second. Two aircraft, one military, one commercial, on a routine approach, somehow ending up in the same airspace. Eyewitnesses say the impact was catastrophic. But take a look at this, shared anonymously by air traffic control, showing the CA, the crash alert system. See the CA going off there? The helicopter on top of your screen, and the American Airlines flight at the bottom of your screen. And this CA, this crash alert, is going off for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, on and on. Here's the crash alert, crash alert, crash alert. It's a very long crash alert. I'm not a pilot, but we will speak to a pilot about that in a second. So eyewitnesses say it was absolutely catastrophic. At this hour, authorities haven't confirmed the total number. I believe it was 64, but I don't know if we have an official number on that. 60 passengers on board the jet, a crew of 4, plus 3 soldiers in the Black Hawk helicopter. And we're looking at what could be one of the deadliest aviation disasters in recent memory. One of the big questions, though, is about, and they haven't recovered yet the black boxes. We just got word on that. One of the big questions, though, is whether this helicopter was using any sort of new remote control technology that was just showed off recently. I think it was Boeing that just showed this off a few months ago.
Conference.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we've got our Black Hawk helicopters now can be controlled by remote control. So you can just take control, from the land. You don't need to be on board this aircraft to have control of it.
Well, who, Clayton? That's the question.
Yeah, who may have.
If one person can control it, can someone else hack it?
Well,
that's
all of these things, of course, can be hacked. We saw, we specifically we covered here on the show, journalist Laura Logan had reported the cyber attack on the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and that ship, of course, that was used, and she confirmed internally in the intelligence state that it was, in fact, a cyber attack on that ship. Mainstream media ignored it, of course. So let's take a look at this. I mean, this is some of the cleanup that's happening right now. It's now moved from a recovery to, from a rescue to a recovery operation, and there are no folks still alive, sadly, on this. So, was it a failure of the FAA? Thanks to DEI. President Trump just spoke a short time ago and slammed the FAA under Pete Buttigieg's leadership, and says he destroyed the FAA. And you can tell Trump is pissed. Listen.
Have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, actually their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress where you have many, many planes coming into one target. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation, his government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity.
Trump very rarely swears like that.
I know. I mean, you can tell he's pissed. Let's bring in Jim Desmond. He's a former pilot, 33 years with Delta Airlines. He's landed at this spot hundreds of times, maybe too many times to actually count. So he knows this landing zone very, very well. Jim, nice to see you. The FAA, the NTSB are on the ground investigating this right now. We know it could take weeks. They're telling us today it could take a long time. We're going to get all the information together correctly. But just your sense of some of the inconsistencies and oddities here of this crash last night from having flown it so many times.
Well, I mean, it definitely was a tragic crash and should not have happened. Unfortunately, I'm not sure about the manning in the tower, if there was enough people there or not. But unfortunately, and this is all speculation because the NTSB is going to do their investigation. It's going to take months probably to unravel this whole thing. But just from what I've seen, if you're an aircraft and traffic is pointed out to you, if you say, I have that aircraft or I see that aircraft, then it is upon you in your aircraft to see and avoid. And what I heard of the audio is that, they did point out to the helicopter crew that there was traffic there. If they had them in sight and they responded, they did. And that really lies on the helicopter. And things could have been done prior to by the tower or the FAA to say, the air traffic control to say, give that helicopter a different heading if they knew that where the American Airlines was coming in. That radar that you showed there that showed the CA that, crash ahead or crash avoidance, whatever the A stands for. But we don't see that in the cockpit. That's got to be probably was in the tower or with approach control or somebody else that saw that. But it's tragic, and there was training going on in the helicopter, which to me is another kind of a red flag, particularly in a very highly used airspace. And there's a lot of restricted areas right around there, right? There's areas actually that are prohibited for you to even fly into or over. The White House is very close by. The Pentagon's close by. The Capitol is right there. And even the vice president's house is got a prohibited area of aviation. So there's a lot of restricted and kind of tight airspace right around that airport. So, the training is, like I said, is a red flag. And not because, they weren't skilled pilots, but because, unfortunately, and I saw this in the airlines, and they used to beat it into us as pilots in training whenever we ever had to go back to the simulator, is you make sure one person is flying and looking out while the other people are dealing with whatever the situation or the training or if there is a problem. So that one person is always flying the aircraft, and all too often you see everybody heads down. in a training situation. They're looking at the computer. They're saying here, because all this stuff is computer driven right now, a lot of it, even the remote control was mentioned. A lot of this is computer driven. So oftentimes when you're flying aircraft, especially complicated aircraft, your head's down. You're not looking out. You're looking at the computer. You're looking at the equipment. And that's really, I think, with 3 of them in there, one of them should have been at least been looking out for the traffic. Now, this is all speculation, but the training flight kind of scares me that they were maybe involved with something else other than flying the aircraft at the time.
Right. That's something that was so shocking to me, because for those of us who don't know that airspace well, it's shocking to think that the military could be conducting dangerous experiments or training exercises in the same airspace as civilian airspace. And so I thought, how often does this happen? But just today, coincidentally, I spoke to a stewardess, a flight attendant, who said we see them all the time when we fly into DC. We see these maneuvers, but they stay to their side of the river and we stay to ours. Is that your experience, that the river is forked? You can see it in the map. So why do you think they might have been on the wrong side of the road, so to speak?
I don't know. It could have been because potentially most of the traffic, and this aircraft included, the American Airlines, land on runway 1. It's the much longer. It's about over 7,000 foot runway. It's a much longer, and the one that is mostly used. Now the tower, and they did it in plenty of time, asked the American to use runway 33. And because they're a smaller jet, that runway is about 5,200 feet long. It's a smaller jet; it can handle that runway is adequate enough. So they took that runway. So maybe the pilots are used to the helicopter pilots are used to everybody landing on 1, not this extra maneuver that had to be done for the American to land on 3-3. So which meant they had stayed a little bit longer out over the Potomac than maybe the helicopter pilots were used to. But if you call it traffic in sight, you own it. You got to stay clear of it. And unfortunately, that's not what happened.
We heard from the New York Times that they did confirm that there was only one person in the air traffic control tower. So the New York Times did confirm that. Of course, you heard President Trump's message about DEI and all of that. Of course, that's being thrown around today. Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, came out and said there was a mistake. We take responsibility for it. Which, when have you heard a politician say that in many years? So people are throwing. He said nothing nefarious was at play here. So, do you think anything is troublesome to you? Any big questions, or was just simply a mistake?
Or let's ask the question this way: assuming everybody's telling the truth and everything's on the up and up, where are the possibilities for some bubbles like that? That what might be called a conspiracy theory could be true. Where would we leave space for that?
I hate to speculate too far ahead of what's happened, I don't know if the conspiracy, absolutely the FAA needs more staffing and more manning. And unfortunately, the tower controllers or the people in the tower, they do minimum staffing sometimes, which may be at that time of night, because it was, later at night, and it may be that one person is adequate. However, 2 would be ideal and 3 even better. So I do know that even in flying that I still do locally, sometimes tower controllers will tell you, no practice landings, no practice approaches here. We just don't have the staffing on hand. And so this has been prevalent, for the last 4 years at least, of not having enough people, trained in air traffic control in that capacity. And so as far as the DEI portion, I'm not really sure where that was going. And maybe some of those people that had higher disabilities, maybe they weren't in the control towers, but maybe they were working in other capacities. But I know it's very stressful to, for air traffic controllers, but they probably were at minimum staffing. We'll find out, because I think I did hear there was more than one voice in the audio from air traffic control. From just what I heard, it sounded like there was a female and a male voice, but I'm not really sure who if those were from aircraft or that was actually from the tower.
We'll get you here on this, Jim.
I have another question. Sure. Is it true that those planes fly from the right, that the pilot is on the right of that aircraft, and so maybe they can't see as well around the left?
It's both. It depends on. Okay. I mean, this is how it normally goes. If you're flying a trip, if I'm on a trip and our first leg is LA to Atlanta, for Delta. And then the next leg is Atlanta to New York. So I would fly the first leg. The captain in the left seat would fly the first leg, and then the co-pilot operates the radios. Then the next leg, it swaps off. The co-pilot's actually the pilot at that point in time, and then I'm working the radios. And so you swap off. So there is no real, left or right position that's better or worse. If both pilots are capable of flying the aircraft, and so we stay current and proficient. Often we just trade every other leg that we do on a 3 or 4 day trip, goes back and forth between the two pilots. So there really isn't. I'm not sure who was flying the aircraft at the time, but that's not an issue.
I'll get you out of here on this, Jim, which is the helicopter. The questions about this helicopter, which is, was it manned? I mean, we know 3 people were on board, but were they actually manning the craft? Is there a way to tell that from this flight pattern? And when American Airlines says, helicopter, change course immediately, the Black Hawk helicopter should be able to maneuver incredibly fast, right?
Well, yeah, that's usually the slower moving aircraft at the time, and that's who usually should get. And air traffic control, it said, there's traffic right here. So the acknowledgement of the traffic, like I said, is on whoever says they see each other. Whoever sees each other first has that responsibility. So there could have been, I guess, some sort of because it looked like that collision path was prevalent for a long period of time. It wasn't just like somebody made a last minute turn. That the helicopter should have been told, hey, stay to the the west side of the river and or stay to further away. Probably should have been given a heading to avoid that traffic. But when they say they see it visually, they own it. And so unfortunately, with that collision alert, the controllers probably should have seen that and then did something, or he told American to go around, or some other type of maneuver to avoid the collision. Unfortunately, that didn't happen.
Can I ask just one more kind of question that's haunting me? Do you think that they suffered? Do you think that it was instant? It looks like it was an instant explosion, and maybe the passengers didn't know. Do you have any? It happened
very quickly. What I saw is they were about 375 feet in the air, which is. Yeah, when you're falling very fast, I think it was pretty quick because everyone was surprised, and by the time they maybe even figured out,
maybe they didn't feel like
happened. They hit the water.
It seems like it was such an explosion that you would hope nobody would survive for the fall. So I'm sorry to ask it that way. It's just something it's haunting for all of us, I think.
Yeah, you'd be terrified to know you're going to die. It's like this is. And so. Hopefully it was quick, but they didn't have. Unfortunately, they didn't have far to fall, and hitting that water is like hitting concrete. So it's not. Hopefully a quick death.
Okay, thank you for that expertise very much.
Thanks for having me.
Jim Desmond is a 33-year veteran pilot with Delta Airlines and flew that route hundreds of times. Jim, thank you so much. We appreciate you jumping in today.
Thanks, Blake. Take care.